Could this be it? A new peace plan might just be the beginning of the end for the war in Ukraine. But what's actually in it? And does it even have a chance of working? Today, we're breaking down the huge, high-stakes proposal that's now on the table.
So after a series of really intense, high-stakes talks, U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators have managed to hammer out a brand new 20-point framework. And the goal? Well, the goal is to create a lasting peace. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What's actually inside this framework? We're going to unpack its key proposals, see how it tries to tackle the toughest issues, and look at the major hurdles it still has to clear. First up, let's take a look at where this plan even came from and what Ukraine's leadership is really hoping it can achieve.
Right from the very beginning, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been crystal clear. He's saying this isn't just a proposal, it's the main framework for ending the war. That kind of language, that signals a massive commitment to this specific plan.
And this plan, it didn't just appear out of thin air, it's been evolving. It all started as a 28-point document that, frankly, was seen as being heavily influenced by what the Kremlin wanted. But after more talks in Berlin, it was refined and then finally nailed down in Florida, emerging as this new, more detailed 20-point version.
So, what's actually holding this plan together? Let's break down its core components, the foundational pillars of the entire deal.
When you boil it all down, the plan is really built on three big ideas. First, giving Ukraine strong, long-term security. Second, making sure it can keep a powerful military to discourage any future aggression. And third, creating a very specific way to resolve the most difficult issue of all, territory.
Now, this is absolutely crucial. We're not talking about some vague promise of support. No, the plan proposes a concrete mechanism for a coordinated military response from the US, NATO, and European allies. It's basically like getting the collective defense of a formal alliance, but without official membership.
But it's not all about outside help. Alongside those guarantees, the plan would also let Ukraine maintain its own pretty formidable defense. We're talking about a military of 800,000 personnel. This makes sure Ukraine keeps a lot of strength on its own.
All right, now we get to the really tough part. This next section is all about how they're trying to tackle the single most difficult issue on the table, the occupied territories in the East.
President Zelensky himself put the choice out there in very stark terms. He basically frames it as a choice between two paths. Either the war just grinds on, or a totally new solution, these so-called economic zones, has to be found.
And here it is, the core of that bargain. The plan lays out a direct, tit-for-tat action centered on the eastern Donetsk region. Ukraine would pull back its heavy forces from the territory it still holds, and in return, Russia would have to do the exact same thing. And the process for this is designed to be very deliberate, step by step. First, Ukraine makes the first move, pulling back its forces by a set distance. That area then becomes a demilitarized free economic zone. And then, and this is the critical part, Russia has to reciprocate, pulling its forces back by the exact same amount to create a buffer. But of course, a plan this ambitious is never simple. It comes with some really significant demands and potential challenges that, honestly, could derail the whole process. And yeah, beyond that reciprocal move in Donetsk, the plan demands a whole lot more from Russia. It calls for a similar economic zone around the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. And then, here's the kicker, it demands unilateral Russian withdrawals from 4 other key regions. It's really important to get this. These are not trade-offs. They're straight-up demands.
But here's a really critical internal challenge. According to the reporting, even before they could present the final plan to Russia, Ukrainian officials themselves were struggling to agree on these super-sensitive territorial concessions. Getting your own side to agree is the first and maybe the hardest step.
So, with this incredibly complex and delicate framework now on the table, what are the next moves in this diplomatic high-wire act?
Well, things are moving fast. Really fast. Russia's expected to give its official response this Wednesday, but only after U.S. negotiators talk with them first. And everyone seems to understand that while this framework lays the groundwork, the final, toughest decisions, those can only be made at the leaders' level.
So the proposal is out in the open. It's a critical moment that could really define the future of this conflict. It offers a detailed, if incredibly difficult, path forward. But I think the key question remains, is this a genuine blueprint for a lasting peace, or is it just a clearer map of all the complex challenges that still lie ahead?